Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Zoning Board of Adjustment for January 4th, 2024. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. All right, so we are here for case number 24-101, presented by Beaumont and Campbell, PA. Before we move forward, let's introduce the members of the zoning board, as this is going to be a joint session with conservation and planning. To my left, please.
Good evening, Richard Tripp.
Crystal Morin, secretary.
Lynn Perkins, chair.
Craig Corbett, vice chair.
And we have a mic. You all set with that, Mr. Dietzel? All right. And we have Code Enforcement Officer Robert Mackey with us, and Ginny Rio is our clerk. She'll be taking the minutes for the evening. As our requirements are, we'll ask the Planning Board Chairman, our acting chair, David Nelson, to come up, as he will moderate this case, and the Conservation Commission and Planning Board both have site here as well. Mr. Nelson, if you'd like to come up. Good evening, sir. How are you?
I am well, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dave Nelson. I'm Vice Chairman of the Planning Board, acting as Chair Pro Tem of that board this evening. And as the Zoning Chair has indicated, this is a required joint meeting of three boards. The Zoning Board will make the final decision during their deliberative session, but the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission may ask questions and make comments. So I think we start with the applicant coming forward and giving a verbatim reading of his application for the record.
It would help if I could find it.
Chair, for your awareness, we do have zoning board member Gaspar.
Okay. All right. All right. Very good. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Adjustment, as well as Planning Board and Conservation Commission members. My name is Attorney Bernard Campbell from the Office of Beaumont and Campbell Professional Association in Salem. I appear this evening on behalf of David and Lori Moali, who are the owners of the property at 31 Cullet's Grove Road here in Derry, map 19, lot 033. My understanding on your procedure is that you, as the chair has enunciated, you would like me to first essentially read into the record the criteria for the special exception as they appear in the application form. So I will do that, and then we can open up for questions or go back to the letter of explanation and anything in there. So just to set the scene, this is a request for a special exception under Article 2, Section 165-84, 80 paren 4, to allow construction within the 75 feet to 150 feet prime wetland setback area, which that section allows for a special exception. Questions are as follows. Describe why the proposed use is essential to productive use of land not within the prime wetland buffer zone. The response is that most of this lot is encompassed within the 150-foot setback buffer. There's a large wetland and prime wetland in the rear of this property. The area not within the wetland buffer setback is covered by the street setback from Cullet's Grove Road, essentially creating an overlap so that there's really no other space on the lot without the requested relief. Describe how the design and construction methods will minimize detrimental impact upon the prime wetland and the 75-foot buffer nearest the prime wetland. Explain how the site will be restored as nearly as possible to its original condition. We're proposing a silt fence erected at the 75-foot prime wetland setback line. Disturbance for any septic system will be restored with loam and seeding. And we can also talk about a potential for the construction of a berm at the back, if that was something that the members felt would be helpful in this situation. What is the reason for the proposed construction? It's to construct a single-family home on an otherwise vacant lot. Without the special exception, the lot essentially has no buildable value for any kind of structure on the property. Why cannot the use be carried out on a portion of the lot which is outside of the prime buffer zone? And the response is that because that area would be within the street setback to Colette's Grove Road, and the area is insufficient to construct a dwelling and the driveways associated with the dwelling. Question 5, or criteria 5, demonstrate that design and construction will be consistent with Article 900 of the Derry zoning ordinance. The design maintains adherence to the 75-foot setback from the non-prime wetland. It maintains 75 setback to the prime wetland. Silt fencing will be utilized to prevent construction impact on the adjacent wetland areas. 6, show that the proposed use will not create hazard to individual or public health, safety, or welfare. In this case, the use is a proposed single-family home which is allowed in the area. It's consistent with the underlying zoning and the surrounding neighborhoods, which are in similar situations as are being proposed here. Will the construction disturb the 75-foot prime wetland buffer zone nearest the prime wetland? And the answer is no. And will the proposed development create landlocked land or unbuildable lot? And the answer to that question is no. In terms of studies or reports that are attached, we have indicated sediment and erosion control features on the plan that we have attached. And the area to be disturbed is approximately 4,660 square feet, which is shown on the plan that accompanies the application materials. That's the reading of the criteria, Mr. Chair. If I can then just back up, I trust that all of the members have received a copy of the survey plan along with the tax map for this area. This lot is a fairly good-sized lot, and if you see the deeds for it, you know that it actually was at one time owned by the town, which then sold it to the Moali family many years ago. The lot is obviously backed up with the brook at the rear, Drew Brook, and there are prime wetlands associated with Drew Brook. The plan indicates that the wetlands were mapped by Mark West in November of 2022 in accordance with the Army Corps of Engineers delineation manual and regional supplements. If you look at the plan prepared, variance exhibit plan prepared by Promised Land Survey, Tim Peliquin, you'll see that we're proposing, you can see where the 75-foot setback is. We're proposing to put a silt fence, as I said, right at the edge of that 75-foot, so that to assure no impact to the actual prime wetland 75-foot setback. We're proposing a silt fence there. The house is proposed to be outside the 75-foot non-prime wetland setback. You can see the effect of the 35-foot setback from Colette's Grove Road. The house is situated essentially as close as we can come to that without asking the ZBA for variance for setback from the road. There is a proposed dwelling of 51 by 34 square feet on the property. And we are trying as best we can to be consistent with the other houses in the neighborhood, which are relatively close to Colette's Grove Road, all of which have large backyard areas that are impacted by the prime wetland setback. And it appears that that 150-foot setback really doesn't exist anywhere along at least the 4 houses to the north of this site. So we believe that with prudent construction and erosion controls, which are shown on page 2 of the plan set, that we can safely and without detrimental impact to the wetland area, allow Mr. Moali to construct a dwelling on this otherwise vacant lot. When you look at the tax map, you can tell that there will be no landlocking or otherwise, because really there's no other place for this to go. In terms of any other land that could be accessed here, this is part of the Colette's Grove Road area. There are small ways or trails that serve the lots to the south and southeast. But otherwise, there's really no impact to any future development plans. The last thing I would mention, if it's of interest to particularly, let's say, the Conservation Commission, we obviously recognize that the lot is significantly impacted by the prime wetland, and it essentially is never going to be affected through your ordinance. But if there was any interest, because the town does own the parcel to the north, if the town was interested in any kind of conservation easement over some parts of the prime wetland in the back, my client would be amenable to perhaps granting the town some overlay conservation easement rights, which would probably enhance the protection of that area even further. So we can talk about that if members have that as a concern.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Campbell. And that concludes your initial presentation?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there questions from any of the board members?
Yeah, let's start here with the zoning board, if we can. When did the applicant take ownership of this property?
We attached the deeds, Mr. Perkins. The Derry Board of Selectmen deeded the property in February of 1983.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, why is it taking so long to develop this property then?
No pressure to do so, I guess. Sat on it as an investment. If Mr. Moali is here to my left, if you want to respond to Mr. Perkins in terms of.
Well, it was, good evening, everybody. Dave Moali, 29 Colette's Grove, which I lived. I bought the house next door when it came up for sale, while I was thinking about building on the property.
I see.
And affordability was the main reason, so.
Okay. So
And realistically, I just want to further respond to Mr. Perkins. And in the deeds that you see, David actually did not become the sole owner of the property until '97.
Okay.
There were the three family members, one of whom actually died during this process of ownership.
Okay.
So you've got 83, the town deeds it to the Moali family, essentially.
Okay.
And in '97, David and his wife reach agreement with the other family members and acquire sole ownership.
I see, okay. I rest for now. Any other zoning board members have questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rowley, other than the house, what's the purpose of the build? What are you looking to accomplish with the property?
I didn't hear the question.
What are you looking to accomplish with the property following the build? What's the reason for the house?
Intentions?
Intention to live there. My wife and I will be living there, and one of my daughters is interested in the house I live in now.
Thank you.
Is that it, Mr. Corbett?
That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, anybody to my left, Mrs. Moran or Mr. Tripp?
No, thank you, not at this time.
Very good. So recognize that Mr. Obimba is remote. Mr. Obimba, if you'd like, just give a indication. Star 9, Mr. Provencher?
Yes, he hasn't dialed in. He's
I think I can make some noise.
All right.
Greg already asked what I needed to know. I know this is a special exception, but if this were to go the normal, in our normal 5 criteria, I was going to ask what the hardship would have been since this was given for a while, but I think Mr. Greg has already asked that, so
Okay.
I just wanted to make that known.
Yeah, the hardship question doesn't typically show
Yeah.
up on the special exception, but I think you've got that, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
All right, good
Happy to
enough.
steal your thunder, Gaspar.
All right, for right now, the zoning board, I guess, has asked its questions. It might be recommended to go ahead and get some input from conservation and planning, and then we can go to Mr. Mackey, that way we can field the initial questions from all the pertinent boards.
Absolutely. Does Conservation have any comments or questions?
We do. James Degnan from Conservation. I apologize, I'm the only member here tonight. I did have a chance to get on property and take a look at the parcel. It is quite a tight lot, so I understand how we're trying to fix the 4K area and the house in the front. The design team, in my opinion, has done the best job that they can do with this property in terms of making it fit. I want to make all aware, Derry carries 150-foot setback from prime wetland, and it was an optional choice for us to go to that level at one point. Not all towns do. The state carries 100-foot. The 150-foot is important when it comes to prime, and I believe we should stand by that. With consideration of this project, when you look at the adjacent properties, if we were to draw this line carrying it across other lots in the plan, you're gonna see that it extends within that buffer for adjacent properties, okay? That's factual. One of the things that conservation likely, if it were to come to our board full for consideration, would be to take a look at the erosion control measure and not just use the silt fencing, but also back that up with straw bales to ensure that there's kind of a belt and suspenders approach to making sure the erosion is kept under control during construction. The other thing on the 4K area that's interesting, it's just a placeholder, right? So there's some fluidity in terms of where things would be placed. I might want to advocate on behalf, again, of the commission, not seeing the plan, for consideration of a tight tank setup, things that we've recommended before around Beaver Lake, where the lots are small and there's not an exact amount of area to have full effluent out of the system. 3-chamber tight tank is something that should be considered as part of the design that allows everything to be more contained, especially with the sensitivity of the prime wetland being within that area that's identified already. Personally, not so much concerned with the dwelling, more so that septic is where I would be focusing, and the commission would likely focus their attention there. In terms of comments, I believe I'll leave mine there unless there are other questions that come my way.
Can you give us that phrasing on that septic again? You prefer that system?
So they're commonly referred to as a tight tank, but there's singular tank and there's 3-tank setups. 3-tank setups are, in my opinion, more effective. It's up to the designer to take a look and make a look at those recommendations, but it allows for a much smaller footprint. They're able to service homes up to about 4 bedrooms. This is identified to be 3 with, I believe, 2 folks living in there full-time. Probably enough if they can make it work.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that highlight.
One more additional note, and I apologize. I did receive from one of the reps at Promised Land Service, they did do test pits today. So just for notation here for the board, the water table is sitting at about 28, 26 inches. It's got a perk rate where they did the test pits in one test pits in this 4K area of about 6 minutes per inch for drainage. So it can drain, but again, in my opinion, a tight tank probably would be preference over a leach field in this location. So.
Okay. Anybody else, questions for Mr. Degnan? Very good. All
Well,
right,
thank you for asking about the chamber, the 3-chamber tight tank.
all right, and planning is fine.
Do you have any questions or comments, Mr. Feinauer?
I'm here.
I do have, I would like to follow up on Mr. Degnan's comments on the septic design. Interesting to hear that there were test pits done today. So I guess my question is, what level of septic system design or suitability has been determined? Have there been any engineering studies with regard to whether a system can successfully be designed in that 4K area, given the groundwater situation?
For my part, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe, well, let me start by saying, I think the initial preliminary indication from the folks at Promised Land is that it's doable. I'm not familiar personally with the system that the member of the Conservation Commission mentioned. I know that there are obviously new designs, enviroseptic designs that have moved us quite a bit in the last 2 decades in terms of subsurface disposal, smaller footprints for systems, a clean solutions system that would pre-treat the effluent such that, you know, the outflow from the tanks are, I won't say they're drinkable, but they are considerably more clear. You can get the systems that require, you know, an annual contract with an enviroseptic, which, you know, the property owner has a contract with the provider to maintain it and make sure that that pretreatment systems work. So I think there are some options there. I'm not personally familiar, as I said, I'm not personally familiar with the one that the Conservation Commission representative did. If the members of the Zoning Board of Adjustment are disposed to make that a condition, I might want to ask that language give some discretion to the staff to say that, you know, that system or something similar by a different vendor or a different outfit, which would provide what the staff, and I'm sure you have staff who, you know, evaluate these systems, the staff would view as comparable in terms of its protection, just in case we're just locked into one vendor. That would be my only observation. And you're going to speak to Mr. Mackey in a minute. Maybe he can comment on whether or not there are more than one small footprint systems that might be available to Mr. Moali in this situation. That's be my only comment.
Great. Thank you, Attorney Campbell. That was the end of my questions, so now I would like to ask Mr. Mackey if he has comments or questions.
Yeah, well, just commenting on the septic systems, and a little bit familiar with the clean solution one that Attorney Campbell mentions. It's basically is a pre-treatment system through the tank, so again, by the time the effluent gets to it, it's much more treated, I guess, than just going through a standard septic tank, and thus allows for smaller footprint of a system. Not so much familiar with the 3-chambered system or what Mr. Degnan was talking about, but certainly there's geomats, there's different types of septics out there that have evolved that, again, take up less space. Although in my opinion, good old pipe and stone is probably the best, but you can't always fit that on a property. So I would suggest that maybe if it's Promised Land doing that design, once they come up with something, to forward it to my office, and I could forward it over to Conservation. We can take a look at it, make sure it's going to be acceptable to everybody. First of all, make sure they can get a design for the lot, and then make sure it's something that would be acceptable, would be my suggestion on the septic. Beyond that, again, this is Colette's Grove Road. This portion of Colette's Grove Road, is a town-approved road. The little lanes that come off of that aren't town-approved, but this section is town-approved and town-maintained. Again, special exception, we don't want to get confused, not the variance, so we're not looking at the 5 criteria. It's those 9 points that were read into the record. The property itself listed at 2.72 acres. Again, the prime wetland to the rear. The town has, I think, somewhere around 25 to 30 prime wetlands designated in the town, which were deemed back in the late 80s, I think, when they did the study, but were deemed, you know, the highest and most important wetlands in the town. So that comes with their own chapter in the zoning ordinance. They were all mapped out. We have a book at our office that lists them all down, and there's photographs of each. But again, there's that chapter, Article 10 in our zoning ordinance that deals with that, and one of the specifics is that 150-foot buffer that's required. Whereas if it's just a plain old wetland, it would be a 75-foot buffer. But anyway, there is that provision for the special exception for the outermost 75 feet, which is what's being proposed here. Another thing of note, there is a 100-year flood zone to the rear of the property that follows that wetland. Again, anytime you're building in close proximity to the wetland, we do want flood elevation certificate submitted as part of the construction, so we ensure that the lowest elevation is at or above the 100-year flood level. That's standard practice when you're in proximity to the lakes. The other thing I might mention, I know down in there is part of getting, were this to be approved, as part of perhaps getting a permit, I probably want our Public Works guy to just take a look, make sure drainage-wise, because I know they've had some issues, and I think the drainage goes in that general direction, just to make sure that whatever's done on the property doesn't interfere with the street drainage or any of the drainage down in the area of the grove there, so. Other than that, some pictures in the file, it's a fairly, that part of the lot, as I was out there taking pictures, it's basically been cleared, and then, of course, you've got the wetland to the rear, fairly straight stretch of roadway there, so that's what I can add for now.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mackey. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak in favor of this application? Please come forward. Please give your name and address for the record.
Just have you hold just a second.
No, it's-
Yeah, and we need to announce public input, remote.
Oh, yes, I got that.
Oh,
Sorry, Mr. Nelson.
yeah, why don't you go ahead and read that public script?
Anybody at home who wishes to dial in, you're going to dial 646-558-8656. Your meeting ID is 323-909-140, and once in, you're going to press *9 to raise your hand. Anybody who's having technical issues, please dial 603-845-5585, and we'll help you out.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Daniel Abadi, 23 Colette's Grove Road, down in Derry. I've been a friend and neighbor of David for around 38 years, and after he bought this property, I knew it has always been their lifelong dream to have a place to build for themselves, to enjoy the rest of their retirement when that time arrived. It took many years to get here, and I'm going to look forward to him having a nice new place there as well. Known David long enough to know that he's a guy who will stick with his plans. He'll do things above board and honestly, and this would be an asset to the community. Living a couple of doors down, I can say that waterways down his area, not going to be an impact in my opinion. That's all I have to say.
Great.
All right, thank you, sir. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak in favor? If not, is there anyone remotely?
Seeing none, rise online, Mr. Chair.
All right, is there anyone in the room who would like to speak against the application? Seeing no one locally, is there anyone online who would like to speak against the application?
Again, seeing none, Mr. Chair.
All right, so at that point, does the applicant have any rebuttal to any of the comments?
No, and the only follow-up I did mention, in terms of the town's land, the issue of whether or not the community would want an easement or a conservation type of easement over any part of the backland, that offer is still open if anybody was interested in taking it up.
Okay. You good?
I think so for right now, yeah. I want to go back, I do want to cover the language better on, with the tight system, the tight tank, when that opportunity comes up. Are you,
What was the system after the septic tank? What was the name of the system you asked?
tight tank?
The tight tank, and was there a section after? Or was it just the tight tank?
He mentioned two kinds.
Okay, I'll go back.
Tank and a 3-chamber.
Got 3 okay, thank you. I thought there was something else in addition.
Is planning all set then? You folks are good? Okay. Mr. Degnan, if you want to give us some more refined, something to remember this tight tank system, it's new to me, and I want to make sure that we note it, perhaps, as Mr. Campbell has requested, if you can give a better definition of that is more flexibility, yeah, that's it.
Flexible.
Yeah,
Well, tight tank is a general term for an enclosed system.
okay.
They can be singular, multi-chambered. I'm stating that the commission would likely recommend a system like that similar as means to lessen the impact of a full system. Not a specific brand, not a specific requirement. We would just most likely ask them to consider something with a lower impact like a system like that.
So is a tight tank design, does that give the variable of design options there, Mr. Campbell, and as well?
As I said, Mr. Chair, I'm just not familiar with it, but I heard him say the word closed system. I mean, this is not something like a holding tank that has to be pumped on a regular basis, or is that what?
There are different types. It's again, the concept is a smaller system.
Okay,
Tight
not
tank is a
necessarily.
general term.
Go ahead.
I have written down tight tank with the least amount of impact. Does that leave enough room? I think including with the least amount of impact.
Yeah, so I don't know, and that gets into the design criteria. I'll go over to Mr. Mackey. Do you have a recommendation how the board, as we discuss this, might want to phrase this that gives opportunity for the designer to come back to you that might meet the criteria that conservation is inquiring about?
Maybe words to the effect that the system must be designed to provide minimal impact, or the least impact, or to the site, or I don't know if that's the right phrase necessarily, but
What do you mean
something-
by impact?
Condensed, and that would be the leaching area. So as opposed to pipe and stone, which is going to give us a more broad leaching area of the effluent, this is going to shrink that area of effluent that can be exposed into the ground. Effluent being gray
Yes.
water.
Gray water, yes. So the effluent exits the tank itself.
It exits the tank itself, but then typically goes to the leach field, pipe and stone being more broad area, and then what Mr. Degnan is recommending is something that consolidates that. And not being familiar with such a design, I don't know what it actually looks like, and I'm almost inclined with Attorney Campbell to say, is this a pump chamber, which totally changes the whole element of a septic system, or is it just a reduced footprint leaching system? And my God, we've got information
Yeah,
on the
so-
screen there.
Mr. Chair, what I'm looking at on it, what this does is it works by gravity of foams and fats and sludge. The incoming wastewater passes through 3 different rooms, and then while within it, the lightest materials will float back and the heavier ones will sink. So it just seems like it'll, to a point, make less of an impact than the leach field would, and it just does a lot more work, it seems like.
Mr. Chair, I have seen a couple of the systems, again, I'm not real familiar, but on like Beaver Lake, not Beaver Lake, Big Island Pond specifically, as that type of system that Attorney Campbell mentioned, that Clean Solutions, which when that drawing was just up there, basically it's multiple chambers in that tank that perform multiple treatments. So again, by the time the effluent comes out, it's very much pre-treated, which then requires a much smaller footprint of a leaching area. So I'm assuming probably something like that would be, like, if you look at the far left, that middle row, it's similar to something like that type of a system.
I see.
You know,
Okay.
Mr. Degnan, I'm not sure if you're 100% positive, but will all of these have, or all systems like this have 3 septic caps on the property? Is that always the case, or?
Yeah, most will have
chamber?
multiple caps. I believe my recommendation would be, and the easiest to understand would be, that the septic design to be as minimum, to have as minimum impact as possible within the 150-foot prime wetland buffer.
Okay.
That gives flexibility for the design team to work within the design, to get it up to the state in terms of their wetland permit to review, and to come back. I think that's probably the way that I would leave it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I was going to suggest the phrase condensed.
Sure.
System that condenses the most effluent design. I think that works, and I think that allows the design criteria to move forward, approval from the state and the town, and then if the board, if the applicant prevails, it eliminates having to rebound back to this committee. So if that works for you and sounds about right. Mr. Corbett, what do you think on the condensed phrase?
I like that. I'm struggling to find a phrase, so that works for me.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir?
me.
Oh, yes.
Just a question, and I think the gentleman may know, one of the test pits that was actually done was actually sort of in the front of the house, which would be outside the 150 foot. If the design was such that it was going to be outside that 150 foot, would Mr. Moali have more leeway to build essentially whatever he wished to build if it was sufficiently outside the 150 feet?
Mr. Mackey, the one design outside the 150-foot barrier, that takes away the precautions that we're discussing, is that correct?
Well, you're outside the buffer, you still are in proximity to the prime, so you still, but technically, you're no longer within that protected area, so.
Yeah. What do you think on that, Mr. Degnan, if we went with a condensed system in that 150 or something outside the 150 without restriction, does that meet your intentions or spirit?
Are we essentially saying swap the house and the 4K area on the plan, in theory?
I don't know that that was necessarily so, but again, it would be a condensed system probably from a footprint standpoint. But one of the test pits was, if you're looking at the plan and you're comfortable with ordinances, it was at the southeast corner of the house, just off where you see the 32-foot setback from the side. Somewhere right in that area, they took a test pit, and conceivably, that system would have to be 10 feet from the sideline for the abutter, but otherwise could be built in that area, which would be outside the 150 foot. I don't think Mr. Moali, and maybe he can comment on it, I don't think Mr. Moali is adverse to the idea of minimizing his septic footprint. I think that's true. Just in terms of the effect of being outside or inside, I just wanted to get that clarification, and I'm not pushing for anything in particular.
Okay. Well, I think we have the verbiage there, striving to get the most condensed system design allowable, and I think we have agreement from conservation on that as well, and planning has no conflict with any of the verbiage as well, I assume?
No, Mr. Chairman. Planning typically doesn't get involved with the details of septic designs unless it's part of a subdivision, which this is clearly not.
Very good. Thank you very much. Mr. Tripp?
I believe Mr. Mackey said that the water level is sitting at 26 inches.
I think Mr. Degnan indicated he has the test pit data that would show the seasonal high water table.
Estimated
26.
high water table.
Yeah.
Water table, all right, not water level, but water table.
What's the design criteria above high water table? Is it 24 inches for the bed bottom? Do you recall, Mr. Mackey?
It was 48.
Okay.
But there's some allowance to that. I'm still guessing this would probably have to be built up some in order to meet.
Got it. Okay. And I think I noticed one of the abutting properties, it looks like it's in newer construction, is in that same kind of criteria. So it's building above the surface of the current grade and packing in around the foundation. Am I correct? Yep. Okay.
That was generally my question, is the tank allowed to discharge directly into the aquifer? And that's no.
The tank is not allowed to dispose directly into the aquifer.
Which is why it would have to be built up.
Correct. It has to be a minimum amount.
The design criteria, the bed bottom, I always lose that number, which is why I throw everybody else over the side of the ship when I ask that question. So, because I can't ever really remember it, but the design typically is so many inches or feet above the high water table to make sure that effluent isn't just dumping into that aquifer.
Okay, I have another question.
Yes, sir.
How much non-permeable surface is being created by the home and the parking area?
Is that within
Can I just say,
Sure.
I was planning on, my own house right now has a stone driveway, and so I would say 0, because I don't want to asphalt it, I want to use a stone driveway. I don't know if that makes it 0, but
Well, you've got, I think the better answer to Mr. Tripp is, in terms of impermeable surface, you've got a 51 by 34 foot footprint, and obviously you'll have roof over that.
Yes.
The issue of the driveways is a little tricky because certain types of compacted, even if it's gravel, compacted gravel can be considered impervious. To get a pervious surface, you'd probably have to use pervious pavers or some product of a pervious paver product in order to be able to get drainage through that in this area. Pervious pavement, is an acceptable use. I've seen it in a lot of places. It can be a problem in this part of the country because of the ice in the wintertime and the water freezes inside some of the pores and so forth. But the answer to your question right now is there'll be a footprint of 51 by 34, which would obviously be impervious because it will be roof. And if we assume the driveway, I'm guessing, sir, I'm not the engineer, but I'm guessing the impervious area is going to be about 7,000 feet maybe, Bob? I'm not sure. It depends on the size of the driveway.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, less than a tenth of, if you look at the whole lot, that's 2.7 something acres, it comes nowhere near like a third impervious area. We're outside of the 250 shoreland regulations anyway, so where they are very big on how much impervious area that you can
But
create.
the reason I asked the question is, you mentioned that you were going to send the Public Works people down to take a look at this
Okay.
to see where the water would be going. So you first off, you need to know how much water is being generated before you can start, determining whether it's an issue or not, which is what the reason for my question. So is that?
Yeah, and the reason for my only comment, and maybe Mr. Moali can answer that better than I can, but I know the town over the years has done some drainage work out there in an attempt to get it to move out of the grove and keep going on its merry way. I'm just not sure where that is, so my only comment being we wouldn't want to mess that up, so.
Yeah, well, that's the question. Do you think that building a house is going to create a problem?
I don't believe so, but that's why I brought it up and why I said maybe just to make sure we would want to have, at least have a discussion with probably Alan Cody in Public Works, just to say, we've got a house going here. We just want to make sure that, that this isn't going to disrupt that.
Okay.
I think to that point, having a review and understanding where any berms, built-up areas around the foundation might create a damming effect, prevent water from rolling off the road. I think the review of any engineering, such as the town public road agent or something like that, allows opportunity for improvements to be in the design during build, so that it avoids all of those issues.
That's not
Would you concur, Mr. Mackey?
I would, yeah.
Okay, good enough.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
And just to Mr. Tripp, I wasn't sure which direction you were going in, but I just asked my client, I said, if there's a concern about the roof runoff, I can tell you in the town of Salem, their engineering department sends these things out for every application. Infiltrate the roof drains, infiltrate the roof drains, infiltrate the roof drains. You go to any application in Salem, and the engineering department is always looking to infiltrate roof drains by putting cistern-type structures at the corners so that the roof runoff, when you talk about impervious surface, that roof is going to create some impervious surface runoff, and typically they require that the roof drains be infiltrated so that it deals with that issue.
And we've had several applications in this area specific more to Germantown Road, I think, and every time they come up, that's the same kind of design that we get. So we're containing the runoff. It's not just rolling off, eroding soil into the lake and so on and so forth. Realize this isn't a lake and perhaps there's some kind of other filtration. I'm not a wetlands expert or in design, but I'm sure Mr. Degnan is familiar with this. So I think that can get covered in any kind of review that Mr. Mackey is suggesting.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Tripp?
I'm trying to figure out how to spell spouts right now.
Spouts?
Spouts.
Okay.
You know, I was
Can I
having
help
a-
him out there, Mrs. Moore?
No, I got it now. You were
Okay.
talking and I was multitasking and I was multitasking poorly. No, I don't think, I think that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Obimba, any chance you have anything you wish to add or ask?
I think I'm all set.
Okay, Mr. Corbett, anything from you?
Yes, just one last question. You say you'd possibly be willing to grant a conservation easement at the rear of the property to the town, or? Yes, thank you.
Over the prime wetland area adjacent to the brook, if they wanted to do some, I saw the picture up there earlier, but, you know, if there's an area, particularly the town, if you have the tax map, the town owns 2026. And if they wanted to get like an area of an acre or an acre and a half in the back, what's adjacent to it, closest to the stream, or maybe a distance from the center line of the stream, because I believe the prime wetland extends some distance from the center of that stream. But if there's a way to demarcate that, you know, to 200 feet or 250 feet from the center, I'd have to see the plan, but in concept, my client's willing to provide a conservation easement over basically the prime that's non-buildable anyway, but that would add another level of protection to the community in terms of someone coming in asking for relief to build in the prime, or not that that's likely to happen, but we made that proposal, and if there's a way to demarcate that, or we'll work with the Conservation Commission if that's something they want, because obviously if you take a conservation easement, now you have a responsibility to maintain it, or at least police it. And I know some conservation commissions are reluctant to do that on a blanket basis because frankly, they don't have the resources or the manpower to police all of those conservation easements. So it probably would be something we'd work with the Conservation Commission to decide if that's something they want or they don't need, because they feel the prime wetland designation in and of itself would be sufficient protection.
Mr. Degnan, do you wish to have option to review this, what Mr. Attorney Campbell is explaining, or do you see a need to go further with that? I just want to leave that option out there as it's being...
I prefer the project be considered as is without that recommendation at this time,
Okay,
and leave it at that.
all right. Well, once the horse is out of the barn, it's hard to get it back in there, so I just wanted to give that option to you. Okay, good enough. All right. So we'll leave that off the table, all right?
Fair enough.
And Mr. Dietzel, anything from you?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, good enough. I think that being the case, and we've, Mr. Nelson chaired and got public input, so we've met the statutes there. Any last comments? We'll head towards deliberative here in just a second, and just want to make sure that you have opportunity to make sure you've got everything in you want.
I believe we have, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thinking forward from the board, are there any questions just before we go into deliberation to prevent having to rebound out? Just give me a gesture, otherwise I'll go for that. I'm sorry again?
Jeffrey Gaspar.
We did just a minute ago. He said he was all set. And so seeing no gestures there of second thoughts, we can take that motion and go into deliberation.
So moved.
Mr. Tripp has the motion for deliberative. Could I have a second, please?
I'll second it.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Moran. All in favor of deliberation, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we're in deliberation. Structured motions. We have, subject to obtaining all state and town permits, which is the norm. Conservation has asked for verbiage regarding the septic design. I would want to enter that the septic design be of the most condensed for effluent. Unless somebody has better verbiage for it, but that condensed word was recommended and approved by Conservation.
The most condensed for what?
Design for septic, most condensed septic design, leaching system. There you go.
I'm just going to read it to you so I don't mess it up. Septic designed to be the most condensed for leaching system.
Correct, that's good.
Thank you.
And were there any other considerations that we heard during this deliberation? That anyone can think of? Anything there that stands out to any of you?
3-tank.
No?
It's
Okay.
3-chamber tight tank.
Okay.
Do we have to put the downspout infiltration,
Of the drainage?
what?
Of the drains?
I think that we had infiltrating roof drains. I think we had left that to some of the design criteria that Mr. Mackey had
Oh, so Mr.
thought
Max,
the town could review. You all right with that?
all right.
All right, good enough. It's never a bad thing to have, regardless, and it eliminates erosion in and around your own structure, so it's not a bad thing to consider regardless. Other than that, I think we're all set on the structure of the motion. If anybody wants to make a unless there's any other points, Mr. Corby, you all set?
All set.
Yeah, all right. All set, Mr. Tripp? All right. Can make a motion to come out of deliberation.
So moved.
Mr. Tripp has the motion. Can I have a second on that, please?
I'll second it.
Mrs. Moran again makes a second. Thank you. All in favor of coming out of deliberation, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. So we're out of deliberation. Ms. Moran, I'm trying to remember how we do this. It's been kind of a while, right?
I read it and then you do.
Yeah, you have a motion to read.
I make a motion on case number 24-101, Beaumont and Campbell, PA, owner David and Laura Mullally, to grant a special exception as provided in Article 10, Section 165-80.A.4 of the Town of Derry zoning ordinance to allow the construction of a single-family dwelling on the property within the outermost 75 feet of the prime wetland buffer zone at 31 Colette's Grove Road, parcel ID 19033, zoned LDR, as presented with the following conditions. We have two. 1, subject to obtaining all state and town permits and inspections. 2, septic design to be the most condensed for leaching system. And that concludes the reading of the motion. I need a second.
Mr. Dietzel?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Motion's on the floor. You taking care of finding a fact, Mr. Corbett?
Do my best.
All right, well, hang on. All right, so that motion's on the floor, so let's read in the finding of fact. Thank you.
Finding of fact for case number 24-101. The board will also include all facts found in the meeting minutes for this application and will incorporate all meeting minutes into its facts and findings. The board found that the owners were deeded the property in 1983, but did not become the sole owners until 1997. The applicants are requesting a special exception to construct a single-family dwelling within the outermost 75 feet of the prime wetland buffer. The area or the property is zoned LDR. This meeting required a joint meeting of the ZBA, the Planning Board, and the Conservation Commission. The property is vacant, but is almost totally encompassed by the prime wetland buffer. The rear of the property is also within the 100-year flood zone. A flood elevation certificate will be required to be submitted to the Code Enforcement Office. And the Conservation Commission felt that this was the best design for the property, but recommended a condensed septic system to lessen the impact.
Very good.
That concludes my finding of fact.
All right, very good. Anybody have any amendments to the finding of fact or any concerns? Seeing no gestures there, so all in favor of moving the motion on the floor for a vote, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Mr. Corbett, what say you?
I vote yes. I feel that the applicant met all of the criteria for the special exception.
Very good, thank you. Mrs. Moran?
Chair, I also vote yes for the reasons Mr. Corbett stated.
Okay, and Mr. Dietzel?
Yes.
Okay, and Mr. Tripp?
I'm very happy with it. It meets all the criteria.
Very good, and the chair will make that unanimous by 5-0. So congratulations to Mr. Mullally. And Attorney Campbell, your application's been approved by a vote of 5-0. And of course, anybody aggrieved by this decision has 30 days to contact us for questions or rehearing. And I appreciate Mr. Degnan for conservation and gentlemen from Mr. Nelson and counterparts from planning for coming in tonight. All right, thank you very much.
Appreciate, ladies and gentlemen, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, next up on our agenda is approval of minutes from October 19th of 2023.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve these as amended.
Very good. We have amendments there on record, Ms. Rio?
I believe I sent.
Okay, good enough, thank you, Mr. Corbett. Mr. Corbett makes a motion, all in favor, second for that, please?
I'll second that,
Very
sorry.
good, thank you, Mrs. Moran. All in favor of approving the minutes as Mr. Corbett has motioned, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. And let me see if we have any other business before us. In the folders, we have no correspondence and no noted other business. So other than that, that about wraps us up for the evening. Do we have any cases pending for the next?
Believe it or not, nothing came in for the second meeting in January,
No
so
kidding, huh? Okay.
we won't see you on the,
Hopefully it's not
Whatever
another
date it
8-week stretch, right?
I was curious. I figured we were coming back in April to see if you were still with us.
All right, well, that being said, if there's nothing else, we can take a
February
motion to, I'm sorry?
Tentatively
Motion
scheduled for
adjourned.
February 1st.
Did you say
I said we're tentatively scheduled for February 1st.
I believe so, yes. I'm sorry to make you repeat yourself a couple of times there, so yes.
Not like I mumble, so.
He just missed your voice.
I will second Mr. Tripp.
Mr. Tripp made the motion to adjourn?
I did.
You did? Mr. Corbett has a second, okay. Very good. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.